So by the time I was 15, I had two sex ed courses. One in fifth grade where they split the boys and the girls. Um, they talked about different stuff associated with that. I thought it was weird that they split the boys and the girls, but that part of that was my gender dysphoria. I was like, why don't I get to learn about the other side of it? And high school, same thing. They were all just very awkward, and there was no discussion around gay sex. There was no discussion around, like, kinky sex. But there was a lot of awkward, and there was a lot of, like, miscommunication. And, so something I wish that was taught about in high school, how to communicate around sex. That was the biggest thing that I've learned now that I didn't know then, which was really hard to negotiate, like what I was okay with and what I wasn't okay with, and I just assumed. I just assumed a lot of things because it wasn't talked about, and I assumed that was part of a normal experience doing it. And then when I had sex for the first time, it was really anticlimactic. It was really just like, oh, well, this is not as good as people say it is. But then I found out that I liked girls a lot better, and that was a lot of fun. And there was also, like, way more communication with girls. And maybe that's just because of the ways in which we're socialized. But definitely more communication around, like, what's okay to do to somebody, and an emphasis on consent, and an emphasis on like, it's not bad to have sex, because there's this underlying, like, well, if you have sex as a girl, you're kind of a slut. If you have sex as a boy, that's a normal part of being a boy. And after a certain age, you're kind of a loser if you don't have sex. And it was all just very, like, heterosexual, which was an issue, right? Because when you're in high school, you don't know. And even if you do, there's a lot that you don't know still, you know? A lot more that I found out in college that, you know, was really helpful as far as figuring out what I liked and what I didn't, and realizing that communication is just a critical part of that. Communication around, again, consent, and what certain body parts I like being called, like what the terms I use for my body parts, and what terms are okay to use for the other person's body parts, and what is okay to do to them, and what is not okay to do to them, and then being able to talk about it later and afterwards, being able to say, oh, I really like this, and oh, I didn't really like this, and I think if you had done this, this would have been way better for me. But this was really interesting. I didn't expect this reaction from myself. You know, this has never happened to me before, and I really like that, versus, you know, other things. Because I know in high school, like, we just didn't talk about it. We just tried it, and it sucked, and tried it a couple more times, and it got a little better. Then I tried it with somebody else, and that worked way better, because we just happened to pair up correctly, you know? We just happened to be a good fit for something like that, because we like the same things. And so that can be really misleading, or was really misleading when I was younger, to think that just because I have good sex with somebody means that they're a good fit for me romantically, which was not the case. So I definitely wish there was way more communication around the fact that you need to learn how to have good sex, and there's nothing wrong with learning how to have good sex, and that people like a bunch of different things, and it's not weird to like certain things, you know. It's only and that it's only inappropriate to do certain things if it's not consensual, and it's only inappropriate if, you know, there's, like, illegal activity involved with that. And if your partner that you're having sex with is not okay with that. Like, that's really the only thing. But there's just so much awkwardness, in high school in particular about it. And even getting to college and hearing some of the horror stories about some of these girls in the dorms that would get, like, coercively, like, just manipulated to have sex without condoms, you know? Because they didn't know any better. Because they were like, well, if I don't want this guy to leave me, I should probably just do what he says. And there's just a lot of guys just doing really, like, not good things to get what they wanted. And, because they hadn't been taught what's okay and what's not okay, you know? They think that if the girl's on birth control, then you can have unprotected sex, and that's not necessarily the case, especially if you have an STD, you know? And I don't think they stressed they showed us a bunch of gory pictures of what can happen if you get an STD, which wasn't helpful, because you're not supposed to scare the shit out of people to teach them things. You're supposed to, like, have an open dialogue about what that means, and practice. And I think practice having good communication skills too, because we were just talked at for an hour and then, like, let loose, you know, and it just was not done very well. And I understand that's also part of, like, an issue of the system itself, and having parents being really scared about what their kids learn versus what they don't learn, and there's a lot of controls around, you know, oh, don't talk about the gay stuff because then they're going to be gay. But that's not the case. It's like, if you don't talk about the gay stuff, then they're more likely to hurt themselves when they find out that they're gay, or when they find out that they like something that's not talked about, because they think that it's not okay. And they're led to believe that anything outside of what's talked about in that classroom is not okay, you know. And there's also, it's clearly uncomfortable for the instructors as well, and you can see that, and so it just contributes to this notion that, like, sex is not okay.